All right, Mo. Welcome back to the vault. This a follow up on that new moon jump. Satabhisha, star concealment, boundaries. You dig what I'm saying? So I'm gonna read from Master Yao Niyamaki Morris's Awakening the Master Masculine. He got a couple sections on boundaries. So the first one is on page 118. Change your boundaries. There are secret there are secrets hidden in plain sight. Your personal boundaries are such secrets. They are hidden from you. You believe you have chosen things which in truth were chosen for you. This is true for you, your father, and your grandfather. Break this cycle of illusion. Is your career what you truly wish to do? Or is your employment a task given to you? Does your religion truly bring you closer to the God inside, or does it serve the institution? Who profits? Who grows? Do your boundaries serve you, or do they always require you to pay and for you to serve them? Do you hate other groups, other nations, other religions who have done nothing to you? Why? What does it profit you? In serving your boundaries, do you violate your original purpose? Can you live in honor by the code of men? In the next part, page 122, the boundaries of the male. So in their heart of hearts, men are born good. A lion is also born good, but that will not stop him from eating you. It is in his nature. Men are born with a blueprint that is designed to love and cherish women. All the things in that table they will grow up to do if society permits, and they maintain a desire to become their true self. The truth is that few do. To some extent, they shape their fortune by their own will. Some are shaped by the will of others. Neither is good. My job is not to judge what you have become. It is to provide a vehicle for you to understand yourself. And if you desire to transform, that same vehicle will allow that too. The forces in society seeking to shape men wind up pounding men. And in the face of this pounding, some men become bitter, cynical, selfish, hurtful, and disillusioned. Men have boundaries. These boundaries are absolute in membrane. His boundaries are the boundaries. He likes what the energy likes. Remember, masculine energy is elemental. It is always the same energy no matter what container or vessel you put it in. In a male termite, the energy can only express a part of its nature. In a male human, it can express a lot more of its nature. The energy did not change, you are just seeing more of its characteristics. The characteristics were always there, but other vessels were not capable of that level of expression. The eagle, the hunter, warrior, and healer are the four categories of male energy. The male energy has a broad bandwidth of attributes. The four categories are a way to measure what he is expressing at each stage in his development. Each archetype of energy is equal to a small spectrum of the masculine bandwidth, and so some elements of masculinity can be measured and categorized. To the extent that you can accurately know what categories a man fits into, you can accurately predict how he will respond in a given situation. But this is not the only dimension to the male energy. Men live within an imaginary circle. So Satabhisha is represented by an empty circle, a circle whose point is everywhere and circumference is nowhere, or point is nowhere and circumference is everywhere. So it just represents boundaries, right? So men live within an imaginary circle. The circle is their boundary. An important aspect of male energy is its relationship to boundaries. Men have a distinct relationship to boundaries. There is no equivalent in females, women. Males have a linear left brain posture that attaches relevance or lack of relevance to an action based on its position in respect to their boundaries. Things are either inside the boundary, outside the boundary, or they remain hidden from him. Outside the boundary is bad. Inside the boundary is good. The male will act friendly and supportive to things inside the boundary. He is either indifferent or antagonistic to things outside the boundary. At puberty, each male begins to enforce his first primary boundary, his personal security space. This is a physical circle about 3 feet out from him. So that's like your aura. Your aura stretches about 4 to 6 feet, right? When other males enter this sacred space, he will push them out or relocate. From this point, the male begins to construct more boundaries. These boundaries are not physical but mental. Most men are walking around supporting 7 or 8 of these imaginary circles, their boundaries. So 7 or 8 is 7 planets. The 7, 8, if you include the shadow planets, those planets all sit within the orbit of Saturn. You dig what I'm saying? So you have a boundary towards your livelihood, your sense of self, sun. You have a boundary towards your emotions. That would probably be your personal security boundary. It's your moon, right? That's really like your foundation begins with the moon. Mercury, how you talk, how you will be talked to is another boundary. Venus is your love and what you lust after and what you desire, the things that you appreciate. That's another boundary in that circle. Your anger, what provokes you, what excites you, what makes you eager, Mars is another boundary. So we walk around with these boundaries, whether you ain't. All right. So the things to appreciate about boundaries are these. What happens to create these boundaries in the man's mind? 2. What is the policy for allowing the boundary to be crossed? The stronger and more evolved a man is, the more rigid are his boundaries. Women by nature are boundary violators, but each man resists allowing his boundary to be violated if he can do so. In many cases, this is a matter of life or death. He will seek to kill you or hurt you for crossing his boundary without permission. Crossing the boundary with permission is a non-event. In other words, it is okay and there is no reaction from the male. Women are often guilty of boundary violation without knowing that they have done so. Boundaries are created. They were not always present. Boundaries are almost always created by some agency outside of the man. Few individual men are evolved enough to create their own boundaries. Only Ab men and Ba men create their own boundaries. Sahu men, the juvenile men, have their boundaries created for them. So Ab is superior and then Ba is holy. So the superior evolved man and the holy man, they create their own boundaries, right? Whereas the juvenile, immature Sahu man, he has his boundaries given to him, right? They are not even aware. All boundaries are created from a simple idea. The idea says that if we separate some element from its whole, a great good will come from this. Or the idea is that if we do not separate some element from its whole, something very bad will come from this. So common boundaries involve personal property, such as cars or land. The mental image of the boundary is stated outside of the mind of the man so that others can know the boundary and respect it. This is a deed or a title. The deed to the property says, "This is my boundary, the imaginary line around this property map. Do not cross it without my permission. I love everything inside this line. I hate everything outside this line." Then there are tribal type boundaries. The idea that creates these boundaries is still very simple, but it is made formal by incorporation. This incorporation is the formal statement of the boundary so that all men inside the boundary know who they are, and so all men inside the boundary can recognize all the other people who remain outside the boundary. There is usually a ritual to go along with a tribal incorporation. Examples of the creation of these boundaries are the street gang, sports team, a business firm like sells stock, a church, a franchise. To be considered a boundary, the protocols of the boundary need to be enforceable by law. In the case of a street gang, if the state will not honor its laws, it will make up its own and enforce them. So women think they know men, but most really do not. In the case of the inferior man, the only things that are really important to him are the things inside his boundaries. Even food, sex, and money are not as important to him as the things inside of his boundaries. Money does not become critical to him until it is one of the activities of a corporation boundary. Only when it becomes important to his corporation does it take on extraordinary significance to him. A boy does not really care about grades in school unless and until the school is incorporated and he adapts this boundary. Unless the school becomes a tribal institution and admits him formally into its boundary, he will not be overly concerned with grades. If he is smart, he might make good grades, but it is not a priority. But the coach knows how to motivate a boy. The sports team is a formal tribal initiation for which he must try out and be accepted. It has a well-defined boundary. In the games, each team has a territory and rules of engagement. There are uniforms to better establish the boundary. He loves everyone on his team and hates everyone on other teams. Most women think that by virtue of being in his family or being married to a man that you are within one of his boundaries, and they would be wrong. If families today operated like a farm or a business, then the male might consider it a boundary. But most families today are not formal tribes. They are just people living in the same space. There is no mental boundary for the child to observe. There is no formal process of being received into a family, such as rites of passage. Therefore, when men grow up, they just move away. There is no psychic connection to a boundary. In the old days, some men looked at marriage as a boundary, but that is no longer the case. When the no-fault divorce laws and the family court system went into law, the institution of marriage changed for males. Understand that from a pure left-brain male perspective, you cannot just dissolve a boundary by petition to a lawyer. A contract is a contract. The boundary is sacred. A man will defend a rigid boundary to the death. With the onset of common divorce in the United States, the common boundary that did exist around marriage as an institution was dissolved. In fact, many men see the woman coming into their home as an intrusion on their boundary. Damn. For about half the men today, the female mate is just a person who has permission to cross his physical boundary, nothing more. She is not inside one of his mental boundaries unless she is part of his gang, church, business, or team, etc. If women were inside male boundaries in the home, men would never hit or abuse them. Damn. That is against the code. Yeah. Most men do not want to spend time with their wives to have fun. Hold on. No, there's no back. Like, wherever I actually sleep at is a boundary for me. Like, I understand, like, okay, if Moon could be one of those circles, Moon might be the personal security, right? My home, Moon in the fourth house in Sag with Lord of Sag, it's like my home is a boundary. It should be peaceful there. I couldn't imagine really trying to da-da-da-da-da. Or especially somebody else coming in, like stirring it up. It's like you actually could get hurt. No bat, I could flip. Because it's a boundary. I understood that. Right? So what it say? Most men do not want to spend time with their wives to have fun. They want to spend time with the other men who are within their boundary. The male has real allegiance and integrity only to people who are within his boundary with him. Are you starting to understand? So the questions a man must ask himself are these. 1. What are my boundaries? Who created them for me? Does this boundary serve me or should I release it? The man brings things inside his boundary to fill his needs, such as food, water, sex, but only the members of his tribe have a special place in his heart. The questions a woman should ask about a man are as follows. One, which side of his circle does he see her in? Is she on the inside or the outside? Most women will be surprised to know. Can she play by his rules? A woman really does not wish to be within the boundary of a man, especially a rigid boundary, unless she is willing to play by the rules. Bad things will follow. If a woman enters the boundary as a wife, if that becomes a sacred contract to the man, know that she can never break it. There is no divorce. He would never divorce you under those conditions. He would try to kill you, hurt you bad, or kill himself. It's like women do not respect boundaries, but men sure do. Fortunately, the boundaries of most men are not that rigid. But if this is a strong-willed man and he has been saddled with a very rigid boundary, people better take care. The great male societies in the past were simple male boundaries connected to a religious thing. In the army, a man will often risk death rather than see the boundary of his unit violated. A man will risk death to defend his property. A member of a gang will kill to protect the gang. Some of the well-known societies included the Gestapo of the Nazi, the Samurai Warriors of Japan, the Braves of the Lakota Sioux War Clan, the Asante Man Warriors of the Asante Empire, the Knights Templar of Europe, the brutal Mau Mau Revolutionaries of the Congo, or the Order of the Jesuits of the 1600s. They all had a code of service based on incorporation within a strict boundary. Some of these orders of men had high ideals, others not so high. We may hate them or admire them, but we must recognize the value of their boundary system. The blueprint of these boundaries was sheer genius. In each case, a diverse group of men were transformed to being focused on the achievement of a singular purpose. It is always easy to separate men and turn them against something. True greatness is the act of uniting men and having them rally for something. This is much harder to do. Everybody talked about was like military, so like God makes man elite on defense. But the key is when you got boundaries and you put up certain boundaries like mental boundaries and stuff, and you establish them jumps as a part of, you get a boost. It's like you get it's that home field, home court advantage that you get. Like in the car, any fourth house place that I'm at, moon in fourth house, I feel like it's too much home field advantage. You dig what I'm saying? But God makes man elite on defense. It's just on offense, you're inclined to do very, very brutal, violent, vulgar things. But when you protect the boundary, it's like, whoa, what you doing? You know what I'm saying? So that was just like it. I was just reading that because that part about boundaries. I guess I should give a moment. I was talking to somebody. They got moon and Satabhisha, and they'll be 28, 29. So they'll be going through like Saturn return. They'll be going through their Saturn return pretty soon, and I the way I see it, Saturn return is kind of like it's a lot. It's a lot, but simply put, coming to age, growing up, maturing, refining yourself, changing your conduct, looking back, your prefrontal cortex is going to fully develop. You dig what I'm saying? But it usually is a restructuring of your foundation and your boundaries. Okay, before you was 28, you was given this boundary and that boundary. You feel me? So you had to go to school, um, whatever those little things was. But then 28, it's like, oh, you might have a kid. You might have to establish boundaries for somebody else to begin to go to school and you know take care of whatever those things are. So you understand what I'm saying? Or if you don't get, yeah, and that could make a rigid boundary because now it's like, oh man, I can't really do the things I used to, or I can, but I gotta be even more strict about these things. You know, it was like you get to a place. This how I felt. As soon as it went into Aquarius, you just get into a space where it's like you kind of had enough. It's like because if your boundaries was given to you, you know, once you outgrow them, Jones, you always getting stepped on. Like people just like, nah, what you mean? I always used to do this, and it's like, why? Well, things change. This not it. You feel me? You just realize I don't like this. I don't like that. I'm not with this. I ain't going through that again. You just kind of like, okay. And it might be associated with things. Like I said, probably associated with the different planets. So if you start with the moon, it's like, you gotta keep your emotions in check. And that's usually Saturn returns. Sometimes it's just like, you know, it's about really getting you out of your feelings. Super tenderized feelings. Getting up out of that. So you'll be like moon is the thing from early childhood. You'll be alright, you gotta change those around, get new boundaries. Why am I fussing about this? What am I projecting? You feel me? After that is Mercury. It's the things that you might have was taught. How you communicate, how you interact, your job. Mercury matures at 32, so you'll probably have a couple jobs before you get to 32, and then you're like, hold on, who gave me this boundary? Am I really enjoying what I'm doing? Yeah, then it's Venus. I think Venus is like 25, maybe. And then it's Sun, and then it's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. You go up the tree. All right, blessings.